As they circle for another landing, the crew and passengers of Flight 621 think they have just survived a close call. The worst, however, is yet to come.
They were completely oblivious to the real problem, and then things slowly started unraveling thereafter.
July 5th, 1970. Near Toronto, the captain of a jumbo jet carrying 109 people circles to attempt a second landing, unaware that he is losing fuel through a large hole in his wing. In an instant, a sparking wire changes everything.
It caught fire. Worked its way up to the wing.
Passengers panic as flames appear outside. Seconds later, an explosion obliterates the tip of the wing.
They were dealing with one crisis after another and then not really having any time to really change their fate.
Down on the ground, Gordon and Carol Parr are startled awake by the sound of the plane overhead.
We were woke up with this horrible sound. So we looked out the window and we saw the shadow going over our house. And we could see the wing on fire.
There was a second explosion which blew almost all the right wing off.
And then we saw a big piece of the wing fall off and go in the field by our house. And then we watched the plane. It seemed to be wavering.
For passengers like the Earl twins and Claude Holliday, hopes of a safe landing fade as the plane rockets towards the ground.
And you have this kind of survival instinct that says, we're going to make it. And usually it's not too far before the end before somebody finally says, well, we're probably not. They probably knew for the last 5 seconds, maybe 10.
I think they were hanging on together, and I guess they said their last prayers. They came together, they left together.
I don't know what would have gone through my dad's mind. I guess just thinking about the kids, thinking about his wife, and thinking about my mom.
And we had a clear view till it hit the ground. And then we saw a plume of smoke, but there wasn't much flame, just the smoke.
And then it was all over. And there was this great silence.
We just were in shock, and I was feeling, how many people were in that plane? Is there anybody survived? What should we do? You just don't know what to do. It's so overwhelming.
Hoping to help, Gordon jumps in the car and drives towards the rising smoke. He is one of the first on the scene.
He looked around, and all it was a blackened heap of metal burning. Like a big plane like that was just in pieces. He just heard the eerie silence and the crackling of the fire.
Ambulance attendant Murray Lovelace and his partner arrive minutes later, around the same time as the airport's emergency truck.
The crash truck put out the main portion of fire. Then one of the guys from the crash truck, he and I took a couple of extinguishers and put out some spot fires. And it was obvious from the destruction that there wouldn't be any survivors.
At their cottage, the family of Claude Holliday learns the fate of Flight 621 on the news.
We had heard on the radio that this flight had crashed in Toronto. My sister and I both knew that that was my dad's flight. We had to go through that process with my mother, which was the shock of telling her, that my dad was on that, what we felt was on the plane. She just started screaming and going, no, your father was too smart to get on that plane. She really had a tough time dealing with it because her and my father were so close together at the time.
In Montreal, Morris Earl is cleaning up after his 2 twin sisters' going away party when a similar news report stops him in his tracks.
It was a very scared time, very helpless time. I felt helpless. I couldn't do. I didn't have any choices. I couldn't help. I couldn't do nothing. I could only stay strong and keep my mother as calm as possible. But it was a crusher.
Captain Hamilton's brother has also heard news of the crash, but few details about who was on board. A phone call from the airline confirms his worst fears.
As soon as I heard him say, that he was from Air Canada, I knew what it was. I tried one last sort of hope, thinking there maybe had been some survivors. And I asked him, were there any survivors? And he said no.
All 109 people on board Flight 621 have perished, making it one of Canada's worst aviation disasters to date. Among the few recognizable items recovered at the scene are a child's doll and a stewardess's uniform. The latter is a particularly painful image for the young ticket agent who recently married stewardess Hildegund Weiserek.
There was somebody young and so full of life. She seemed to have, everything going for her, and then everything was just abruptly ended.
What caused the crash and what might have been done to prevent it become key questions in a public inquiry. Human error is clearly at fault, but blame is also cast across the aviation industry. Poor training and incomplete information regarding the ground spoilers seem to have led to dangerous practices in cockpits across North America. In addition, experts are baffled that some kind of safety device doesn't exist to prevent the accidental deployment of ground spoilers while the plane is still airborne.
Why would you build a system like that where it could be done when you know that it shouldn't be? That there are possible disastrous results? Then why didn't you put a mechanical lock that said you can't pull them?
Before long, a metal restraining pin stands guard behind the ground spoiler lever in all remaining DC-8s.
I think the most positive thing that came out of it, aside from putting in something so you couldn't do it again, was that the whole system got shaken up. Transport Canada hired air carrier inspectors who started a much more stringent oversight of the large carrier.
Unfortunately, these changes come too late for the passengers and crew of Flight 621. Today, more than 3 decades after the accident, painful remnants still surface in the very field where the Champagne flight came to an abrupt end. It is a metaphor, perhaps, for the persistence of memory. When disaster strikes, grief is never easily buried.
The impact on the families was severe. The trauma has continued on through the years. They were devastated then, and they're devastated now.
I would say I probably lost one of my best friends, which was my father.
It's a terrible hole in your social fabric, and it doesn't get less. I mean, naturally the tragic aspects of it become less painful over the years, but no, it's something that you don't get over.